British Columbia Institute of Technology acknowledges that our campuses are located on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh.
Good morning and welcome to BCIT's The Crow. I'm your host, Alessio Cusano, and here are your news headlines to 11:30. BC Conservative leader John Rustad has unveiled a plan that, if elected, will bring local power generation to Northwest BC that will lower energy costs for residents. Smithers, Terrace, Kitimat, and Prince Rupert are some of the communities facing an energy crisis. Rustad said that the local solutions are key to affordable power for the region. This plan will include uses of sustainable wood waste and natural gas. Rustad added that, quote, the Conservative Party of British Columbia believes in local solutions for local communities, and, quote, we will produce the power locally, make it cheaper, and ensure that the people of the Northwest get the energy security they deserve while reducing natural gas delivery charges for everyone, end quote. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's minority Liberal government has survived a non-confidence vote, but the fight is far from over. The Bloc Québécois helped the Liberals in voting down the Conservative attempt yesterday to topple the government. But Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet says if Trudeau wants to avoid an election this year, then he'll have to pass 2 Bloc bills by the end of the next month.
Between now and October 29th, we could come to the conclusion that they have not used the time being offered them to successfully go forward with the projects.
Now an update on the meeting of French President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The leaders have signed a statement aimed at collaborating more on issues ranging from Ukraine to foreign interference. Macron arrived last night from New York and had an informal dinner at Trudeau's home at Rideau Cottage. The two summarized the meeting this morning in Trudeau's office, saying they discussed the extremely difficult situation in Lebanon and a joint call for a 3-week ceasefire that has been supported by some Arab countries. Macron will now fly to Montreal, where he's scheduled to meet Quebec Premier François Legault and discuss artificial intelligence. The visit follows a March vote by France's Senate to reject the European Union's trade deal with Canada against Macron's wishes. Gaza's health ministry says an Israeli airstrike hit a school sheltering thousands of displaced Palestinians in northern Gaza. At least 11 people were killed on Thursday and 22 others wounded, including women and children. The Israeli military says it hit the school in the Jabalia refugee camp and was targeting Hamas militants inside who were planning attacks on Israeli troops. The claim couldn't be independently confirmed. Israeli forces have repeatedly struck schools. They say Hamas fighters use them as command centers. The military says it uses precision weapons to avoid civilian casualties, but the strikes have brought heavy tolls. Ottawa is urging Canadians in Lebanon to get out while commercial flights are still available, as the violence between Israel's military and Hezbollah escalates. Defense Minister Bill Blair says the government is ready to help out Canadians leave if needed.
We have been giving people advice that they should leave, but we have a responsibility to Canadians around the world. And if Canadians find themselves in harm's way, the Canadian government will be there to support them.
The wildfire that prompted a now residential evacuation order for the community of Grand Forks, BC, has grown to about 4 square kilometers in size. That's up from 2 square kilometers after the out-of-control fire was discovered Wednesday, south of the U.S. border. The regional district of Kootenay boundary had issued an evacuation order Wednesday afternoon, saying the Gumus fire was moving north towards the Grand Forks area and tactical evacuations were underway. An update posted to the service's website late Wednesday says the main body of the fire had not crossed into Canada, though crews were working alongside local fire departments to manage one spot fire north of the border. The Vancouver International Film Festival kicks off today. For the next 2 weeks, live performance and events will light up screens and stages across Metro Vancouver. This is the 42nd edition of the festival that brings filmmakers from all around the world with all sorts of categories. Those were your 11:30 news headlines. I'm Alessio Cusano, and you're listening to BCIT's The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow. This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
Yeah, hey Hivers. Welcome back to another Buzzin episode. My name is Lester Casiano.
And I'm Isabella Calisi, and we're your hosts for today. We're talking about bees. Love bees.
Buzz.
So today the episode is What's the Buzz with Backyard Beekeeping? And the thing that we're kind of discussing today is how urban beekeeping can possibly have an impact on local pollinators. To discuss this question of if urban beekeeping does have an effect on local populations and local pollinators, which don't always include bees, like, there's butterflies, the wind, there's lots of different pollinators around. But like urban beekeeping kind of usually has to do with honeybees and like sometimes mason bees, all that kind of capacity. And you have lots of supplies and you have to like get this all from somewhere. So I went to BC Bee Supplies up on Hastings Street, North Burnaby here, and talked to one of the owners, Winston Wong, on kind of his opinions on the subject. So I guess we'll kind of like take you there now.
These are smokers. So did Winston tell you anything about smokers or like any of the equipment? No. Okay. So when we go into the hive, we're disturbing the bees, obviously, and they think we're a predator, kind of like a bear trying to steal the honey. So we use smoke with a smoker to try to mask our scent, and it also makes the bees believe that the hive is on fire. So they'll go into the hive, and they'll start collecting honey to leave the hive with to create a new hive that's not on fire. So we put burlap into the smoker, and then we smoke the hive.
This is Anya Soroka. She works at the shop just for general tidying and cleanup and assistance to Winston. She showed me around the shop and the different types of tools that you use for beekeeping.
There's different equipment for uncapping. There's knives, there's forks, and this is a roller. It happens that there's something wrong with the queen, or you want to split the hive and you need a new queen, and so there are people in the business of rearing queens. And this is all the equipment that we have to help with that, and these are queen...
You're doing great.
These are queen cells. I'm gonna go ask Winston.
Winston is one of the owners. Him and his wife, Ninny, run the shop, but I think Winston's more in charge of, like, the beekeeping downstairs.
Here is this guy in a bee suit on this garden tour spinning honey. And we're like, what is this now? Because we were just interested in the garden stuff. Because we were just starting one on our own. And we basically spent the rest of the day with him, helping him extract honey.
The shop is for local beekeeping enthusiasts, everything on, like, the smaller scale. They supply them with a mix of tools and care supplies and order stuff like colonies for people or queens if they need one to refix their hive.
So we got started about 12 years ago, so 2012-ish. We opened a beekeeping supply shop in 2017. So we were beekeepers for a number of years, and now we're encouraging other people to do the same. I guess there's interest for the scientists, there's interest for the environmentalists, there's interest for the gardener, there's interest for anyone interested in creepy crawly things that fly. So all of that, there's a lot of appeal for bees, and thus a lot of appeal for beekeeping.
Some other facts about bees. So in BC, the number of beekeepers went from 2,793 in 2019 to 4,911 in 2023, and that's the registered amount that we can find. But yeah, I found it was an interesting fact that there's that many, like, at least registered beekeepers in BC. What did you think?
Yeah, that's great. Great to know. Like, I think that's important to know. And, like, for the beekeepers, it's very important to register, of course. And great to see that they're, like, all around everywhere. So, like, if anyone wants to start beekeeping, they're like, hey, there's actually a lot of people doing this. So they have their own support.
That has a sharp edge and a hooked end on the other side. You can choose which side to use, and you just scrape it or wedge it in between the frames.
Almost what our whole business is built around are local bee populations. Now, when I say local, I don't mean local honeybees, because none of the honeybees are local to North America. They're all brought in at some point. But there are enough farmers of bees keepers of colonies that have a surplus in the spring. So we have nucleus colonies, nuke colonies is what we call them, and they are partial colonies that have a queen, a number of frames of bees with some honey and pollen in them. And then that is sold as a bundle that allows people to take them from our shop and put the bees into their own hives. Basically, without a queen, a colony's future is less likely to be sustained. So by bringing in queens or rearing queens, raising queens, we can help beekeepers keep their hives going if there's a problem with any of the leadership in the colonies.
But one of the interesting things that I found when we kind of started looking into this is that apparently a lot of Canadians and a lot of Canadian like bee, honey farmers, whatever it is, where people kind of get like their colonies and their queen bees from in Canada is from overseas. So they get stuff from like Chile, Australia, and that's because like their bees are kind of dying off during like the winter, or there's been a large infestation of like mites and things, so they keep kind of dying off, and the weather's been getting harsher, and that's been kind of harder on these commercial kind of bee suppliers, as well as I guess like variety and things. But I don't know, I didn't realize that. How about you?
No, I didn't realize that at all. It's crazy, like, to think about, like, there's the little bees traveling in, like, those little cases. United States, not that far, but Chile, that's over at least one continent as well. It's a long journey.
Over the last 5 years, right, these are the 5 years of the pandemic, there have been people interested in producing their own honey, trying a new experience. They may have heard that bees are dying worldwide and want to make a difference. So there's lots of reasons to enter beekeeping, but as life returns to a 2019 normal, where people are very busy, their time isn't as available, we are actually down compared to those years. But I'm hoping that beekeeping still remains popular for the upcoming future.
So that's Winston. That's BC Bee Suppliers. I don't know. I think it's fun. I think that's cool. I'm glad people have a fun little hobby that they're able to go to. So who did you get into? Who did you talk to?
So I was able to reach out with Melissa Platsko, who actually studies pollinator science at the University of British Columbia. Talk about bees. It's a nice conversation, like we mentioned it earlier. Just people who like bees are just very interesting to talk to. Yeah, she was amongst the group.
Well, I'm curious to hear what she has to say, especially because she has a master's in it. So I didn't realize people could like master in essentially bee studies, and I think that must be like really fun to kind of go and dig into.
Oh yeah, a lot of things out there.
So here in BC, we have a lot of different bee species. BC itself has about 600 different bee species. In Vancouver, you will commonly see bumblebees. We have quite a few species we see here commonly, such as Bombus mixtus, which is the mixed bumblebee. It's a bumblebee with an orange bum. You will also commonly see small bees here. See a lot of our mining bees. So these are bees that kind of nest in the ground. Because they're smaller, they typically forage in and around that area that they nest. We also see cavity nesters. So things like leafcutter bees will nest in cavities of wood or even in underground cavities. And we will also see like mason bees, like osmia.
That's a lot of bees. That's like 600. That's a lot of bees.
That is, yeah. I can only name like 3 or 4 types, and the fact that there's like hundreds of different more, that's crazy.
I don't know. No, I didn't realize there was that many species. Like, I guess it makes sense. There's like so many types of like trees, for instance. But for like bees, they're just such small little guys. I think in my head, I was just like, oh, it's a bee. That's a fat bee. That's a fuzzy bee. But like, I don't think like that one's a mason. That one's a leafcutter or anything of like that kind of jangle.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. Like, when you see a bee, it's like, oh, it's kind of like when you see like a dog. You're just like, oh, that's a dog. But it could be like a chihuahua or like a greyhound. And it's actually the same thing with bees, which is really cool.
So there's a couple different ways that backyard bees, more so honeybees, can impact native bees. There's a possibility for competition with native bees for nectar and pollen, especially in urban landscapes where some of these gardens and flowering areas can be fragmented or very small. There's an increased likelihood of pathogen transmission from managed honeybees into native bee communities. Several studies have seen that some diseases can pass from managed honeybees into bumblebees as well as other native bees. And then kind of finally, this is less for our native bees, more for our plant communities, but honeybees can change the composition of wild plant communities by providing resources for honeybees and deterring native bees from foraging there. Essentially, a selective pressure towards catering to bumblebees in natural areas or native plant communities.
But yeah, I didn't really realize that about that they could change the composition that much of like the environment around them. That's pretty powerful for just a small little pollinator.
Yeah, that's great. And like, that this section of the conversation, Melissa was awesome. She just really knowed a lot about it. And like, yeah, I learned a lot about it as well, like how much it impacts, like the resources they do and like the work it kind of does, They're quite little guys, so of course it goes like uncharted. It's so really cool to know about and just to have to think about.
It makes me think of, because it does make sense. It's like when you have like a lot of humans and like an area and there's like a patch of grass there. But if enough people like walk over it, then it's going to get changed, and then that changes the environment around you. So it makes sense. It's just, I didn't realize that it impacted it that much.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't either. It's just like so cool how much work they do. Just like they have their own little lives, just like humans.
And the bees don't like being exposed, so we keep these panels covering the glass until we want to see the bees, at which point we remove the panels and we can observe the bees.
So, conflicts with native pollinators is not really our issue. We just hope that of the people that choose to have colony-driven bees on their property, that they have enough education and experience to arm themselves with so that they can effectively beekeep according to their goals. But even if you're not willing to get stung throughout the year, not willing to take any honey from the honeybees, you can still participate in the love of the bee by planting pollinator flowers. Any nectar-rich flower will do. Nursing and keeping good trees is another way to help your local beekeeper, even buying local honey. I mean, that is a way to benefit yourself and beekeepers down the road. Lots of ways to participate, even if you're not a beekeeper. So we love everybody.
The best way to support local bees is to support diverse plantings of native plants, plant them in your garden, support them in your parks and community gardens, as well as to just spend some time either taking a pollinator walk or looking online at wild pollinator resources and just learning a bit about the bees that live around you. All these native bees get overlooked, and it's hard to implement conservation measures when people aren't even aware these bees exist. To look into wild bees, the Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation is a great resource. And my website, of course. Get curious. Start learning about wild bees. Yeah.
I think that's really nice. I think it's nice how kind of like both unanimously kind of like think the same, like Winston and Melissa, I mean. I think it's interesting how both of them have like a similar reaction of like, do your research and, figure out what's around you. And I think honestly, that kind of seems like the best way to like go about this entire thing.
Yeah, for sure. It's great to see they're kind of like, even though they're both from like different kind of like communities or different opinions, they're still kind of to spread the same message, even though the message is slightly different. And just overall looking out, they want to keep their what they do safe and fun.
Did you think that when we started the school year here that you would be learning so extensively on like bee colonies in Canada?
I did not actually, but I'm kind of excited that I got to do this and happy I got to do this.
Nice. Well, thanks for tuning in, listeners. This has been The Hive, and we're your hosts. I'm Isabella Calisi.
I'm Melissa Cusano.
And we'll see you guys next time. This episode was produced and edited by Isabella Calisi and produced by Alessio Cusano. All of our fun facts about bees came from Statistics Canada in their 2023 report. Our intro and outro music is by Colix, and we'd like to thank our guests Melissa Platsko, Winston Wan, and Anya Soroka for joining us this week as we discussed bees.
everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretanero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane.